Today, we're diving into a story that has sent shockwaves across political, diplomatic, and human rights circles. A Palestinian leader has had his US visa revoked just days before he was set to address a major international gathering, effectively silencing his voice before the world stage. This move has raised serious questions about free speech, political suppression, and the way international policies are being used to shape narratives surrounding the Palestinian cause. Let's break down what happened, why it matters, and how it impacts the broader struggle for justice and recognition. The first thing to understand is what it means when a visa is revoked at such a sensitive moment. A visa isn't just a piece of paper. It's essentially a pass that allows someone to enter another country, in this case the United States, to participate in important events like conferences, UN meetings, or political forums. For leaders from regions facing conflict or oppression, these moments become some of the only opportunities to speak directly to the global community, to highlight injustices, and to put pressure on powerful nations to act. By revoking this visa, the U.S. has effectively blocked not just the leader's physical presence, but also his ability to use that platform to shed light on the struggles faced by Palestinians under occupation. Critics of this move argue that it is not just a bureaucratic decision, but a political one. The United States has long been a key player in Middle Eastern politics, and its decisions often reflect deeper alliances and interests. By silencing a Palestinian voice right before a crucial event, many see this as a deliberate attempt to protect certain narratives while muting others. The question is, whose interests are served when a leader advocating for Palestinian rights is prevented from speaking? From a technical perspective, revoking a visa usually comes with reasons such as alleged security concerns, diplomatic pressures, or violations of visa regulations. But in cases like this, such explanations often appear weak or politically motivated. After all, if the leader had been granted the visa in the first place, it suggests the application was reviewed and approved after background checks. For it to suddenly be revoked at the last minute indicates a change in political winds rather than a discovery of any new threat. This fuels suspicion that the decision is less about safety and more about silencing dissent. Now let's think about the symbolism here. For Palestinians, whose voices are already marginalized in many global platforms, this act of silencing adds to decades of frustration. Their narrative often struggles to compete against more powerful states that control the flow of information and diplomacy. When one of their representatives finally gets the chance to speak on the global stage, having that opportunity stripped away feels like a denial not only of an individual's right, but of an entire people's right to representation. For Muslims worldwide, this situation resonates deeply. The Palestinian struggle is not only a political one, but also a humanitarian and religious concern. Muslims across the globe see the suffering of Palestinians as an issue of justice, dignity, and basic human rights. When a Muslim leader is prevented from speaking, it feels like yet another attempt to erase or delegitimize the voices of those calling for fairness and peace. This does not only affect Palestinians, but sets a dangerous precedent for how voices of resistance are treated internationally. We should also look at the broader context. This comes at a time when the situation in Palestine is more critical than ever. With ongoing tensions, settlement expansions, and humanitarian crises in Gaza and the West Bank, Palestinian leaders are desperate to bring international attention to these issues. Speaking at global platforms allows them to humanize their cause, to show the world that beyond the headlines are real families, children, and communities suffering daily under occupation. By removing this opportunity, the U.S. has, in many people's eyes, aligned itself once again with silencing the oppressed rather than uplifting their voices. There's also the question of free speech. The United States often presents itself as a defender of democratic values, freedom of expression, and open debate. Yet, actions like this expose contradictions. How can one claim to support freedom of speech while actively preventing a leader from speaking in front of the world? The revocation of the visa sends a contradictory message. Freedom of speech is valued, but only when it aligns with certain interests. This not only undermines America's credibility on the global stage, but also feeds the perception that some voices are systematically excluded from international discourse. For many Palestinians, this isn't surprising. They've seen their representatives sidelined before, their grievances ignored, and their demands for justice often drowned out by more powerful interests. But for the global audience, especially people who value fairness and equality, this raises critical questions about the integrity of the international system. If a people fighting for recognition and rights cannot even have their representatives heard, what does that say about the balance of power in global politics? It's important here to also recognize how Muslims view this in the broader picture of history. For decades, Muslims have witnessed injustices toward Palestinians, from displacement in 1948 to occupation after 1967, to the blockade of Gaza in more recent years. Each chapter has added to the collective wound. When a leader from Palestine attempts to articulate this pain and these demands to the world, only to be blocked, it feels like an extension of that very injustice. For Muslims, this is not about political maneuvering, but about dignity, faith, and solidarity with a people denied their basic rights for generations. Now, to bring in the human side of this story. Imagine the leader himself. He has prepared to speak, carefully crafting words that could resonate not only with policymakers, but also with ordinary people across the world who might be unaware of the daily suffering in Palestine. He carries the weight of his people's voices, their hopes, and their stories. And then, at the very last moment, he's told he cannot enter, he cannot speak, he cannot share that truth. That is more than just a political setback. It's a personal blow, a silencing of hope. For the Palestinian people who were counting on him to deliver their message, it feels like betrayal by the international system itself. Of course, defenders of the U.S. decision may argue that countries have the sovereign right to decide who enters their borders. And technically, that's correct. No country is obliged to allow anyone in. But the issue here is not the legal technicality, it's the moral responsibility. When you prevent oppressed voices from being heard, you tilt the scales in favor of the powerful. Sovereignty should not be used as a shield to silence truth. There's also the ripple effect to consider. Other countries and international organizations are now watching this closely. Will this embolden other nations to restrict visas for leaders they don't want to hear? Will it set a precedent where only select voices are allowed at global gatherings while others are excluded? If that happens, the very idea of international dialogue becomes meaningless. Dialogue must be inclusive to have legitimacy. Otherwise, it's just an echo chamber for the powerful. For the Muslim world, this could further deepen mistrust toward Western policies. Already, many Muslims feel that their perspectives are dismissed or manipulated on the global stage. Incidents like this reinforce the belief that when it comes to justice for Muslims, particularly Palestinians, the deck is stacked against them. And when trust erodes, it becomes much harder to build bridges, to work toward peace, and to find solutions. Let's not forget the practical implications either. The leader's speech could have influenced policymakers, journalists, activists, and ordinary people around the world. It could have inspired new initiatives, sparked debates, and drawn attention to urgent humanitarian issues. That potential impact has now been blocked. The absence of his voice leaves a vacuum that may be filled by less sympathetic narratives. This is why silencing voices is not just about denying speech. It's about shaping outcomes by ensuring only certain perspectives are heard. Many analysts believe that moves like this are part of a broader effort to delegitimize the Palestinian cause on the international stage. If leaders cannot attend key events, if their voices are muted, if their stories are blocked, then over time, global awareness and support may weaken. This strategy relies on controlling access to platforms, ensuring that only narratives favorable to certain states dominate. But the danger in this approach is that silenced voices often find other ways to be heard. And when people feel consistently excluded, their frustration grows, sometimes leading to greater instability. What we're seeing here is a test of international values. Do we truly believe in dialogue, inclusivity, and fairness? Or do we believe in selective justice, where only some are allowed to speak? The revocation of this visa may appear like a small bureaucratic act, but symbolically, it carries enormous weight. It signals to Palestinians and Muslims worldwide that their voices can be dismissed, even at the most crucial moments. It's also worth asking, what is the world afraid of hearing? If the Palestinian leaders' words were not important, if they were not powerful, there would be no need to silence them. The very act of silencing suggests fear, that his words might expose truths that are uncomfortable, that they might challenge dominant narratives, that they might inspire global solidarity with the Palestinian cause. Silencing is often the strongest evidence that a voice matters. At the heart of this issue lies a simple truth. Palestinians deserve to be heard. They deserve to tell their own stories, in their own words, on platforms that reach the global community. No one should have the power to erase or mute their narrative. And for Muslims worldwide, supporting that right is not about politics alone. It's about upholding justice, dignity, and humanity.